Underneath this jungle of undergrowth lies nearly 2,000 years of English history. The council wants to create a park here, and a local chap wants to build a hotel over there. Now, we know that there's a Roman fort over there somewhere because it's already been excavated, but there should be a medieval castle here and maybe even a Jacobian or a Tudor mansion as well. More than that, we don't know, but in just 3 days, we will. This is Malton in North Yorkshire. It's a quiet little market town between Old Malton and Norton, on the banks of the River Derwent. The dark green jutting into the town is our site, and it's going to be a big challenge. Not only are we looking for 2 buildings from different periods, but the site is completely overgrown with nettles and trees. The good news is that we've got Mick back, but I don't think he's going to be running around like he normally does. Mick!
Hello, Tony.
How are you feeling?
Well, I'm not allowed to swear, so I'm not terribly happy with this.
Are you going to be able to stand up, or are you going to be stuck in?
Yeah, I can stand up and I can be pushed around, and Nick's come to push me around for the weekend.
Oh, you got a safety belt on.
Safety belt on the leg, yeah.
Look, we've got this potential treasure trove under here. 2 periods, possibly 3 if we've got this Roman fort here as well. How do we go about assessing what our priorities are?
We've got a lot of background material for this one, which is very nice, but you know, you can see what it's like. It's a bit like a jungle, really. I think the first thing is we're going to have to do some clearing.
But that may be easier said than done. There's 10 acres of this stuff and it's very thick. So we're just going to have to follow in the nettle cutter's footsteps. Which is just what geophysics have started doing. While Stuart takes charge of the nettle cutting strategy. Behind this beech tree, Mick, Phil and Carenza are busy too. They've found a clue to the medieval castle. They're standing on a large mound, which suggests there may be rubble from a building underneath. Mick wants to put a trench into it here.
We'd put a trench across this bank and ditch down there.
But Phil's not happy.
I mean, we've obviously got a hell of a slope going down there, but I don't know. I'm bothered by the roots.
You're worried about the tree roots
There's
coming across,
you know,
yeah.
what
We're on a mound here, it goes around there. Can we start off here, Phil, and if we hit problems...
I can't see why, if that is the same
if
slope...
If you're going to go, you have to give me a bit of notice.
Well, I was going to say don't run off, Mick.
No.
Look, if I hack my way through
here...
Yeah,
I can see what you mean. It is dropping away.
It's going to go down here.
Yeah.
And it certainly, by the time you get... See, I'm going right the way down.
Yeah.
And it looks to me as though this is the same slope coming round here.
Well,
I mean, we got no roots here.
But surely, if it is a mound, we need to have a section across 2 bits of it. Can we start a trench here? If we really hit problems with it, we may have to abandon it. By that time, the nettles here will be cleared. Then we can move to there.
The other thing, look, Phil.
All right.
If you come back over here where we were, look.
Yeah.
Is that the bit you're on about is the top bit of here.
Yeah.
I mean, it is actually carrying on down, that far down that you're looking at the rooftops of houses. And if you're going to have an edge of a castle, while that might be part of the internal arrangement, this is much more likely to be the edge of it, isn't it? With a drop like that and the river at the bottom as well.
Sounds like I'm being outvoted, doesn't it?
I mean, this whole lot is a scheduled ancient monument, isn't it? What does that actually mean, John?
Well, the schedule is actually a kind of list which is compiled and maintained by the Secretary of State for National Heritage.
Right.
which identifies sites which deserve statutory and special protection. English Heritage were interested in the site and actually support the Time Team's investigations.
Yeah.
And in fact, on our advice, the Secretary of State actually granted consent, but it has specific terms and conditions. You're allowed 5 trenches here, which will cover no more than 200 square metres to try to locate the castle and the Jacobian mansion.
And we've only got consent to dig in this half of the site because English Heritage don't want us disturbing the Roman fort, part of which is in the other half. I just hope the castle's in our bit. There's a good sign it may be. Trench 1 is under these trees, and just nearby, these look like old walls. Could they be the walls of our castle? You can't get at them from the site, so Carenza and Beric Morley, our historical buildings expert, are attacking from the street.
It looks like it might be open in there. Should we?
Yeah.
Let's try and see if there's anyone in here. Because, I mean, if that house there is the same as that there, then there's an open space.
That's right.
That possible medieval wall might even be visible. It looked quite impressive from... Hello. We're archaeologists looking at the castle site, and now we've sort of been in there and looked down on it. It looks like quite an impressive wall there. I wonder if we could come and have a look, see if we can see it from your garden.
Yes, certainly.
Right.
Come in.
Meanwhile, Stuart's almost off the map at the other end of the site. Stuart, why are you poking around the Roman fort? The fort's miles away from where everyone else is looking for the medieval castle, and we can't dig here anyway. What's he up to?
I think one of the things we've got to consider on this site is why was there a castle here in the medieval period? Why was it placed here? And I'm looking to see if there's any evidence in these slots. This is the line of the Roman fort. You see, it's massive. If you came here in the 12th century and this was already here, big defences, wouldn't you use it rather than digging your own?
really,
That's right.
You? Yeah.
And I think there's a strong possibility that this outline of the Roman fort that was here would have been used as a bailey for a motte and bailey castle in the first instance.
Remind me about what a motte and bailey is.
A motte is it's a mound on top of which you put a timber palisade and a timber tower at first. It's just a retreat.
And the bailey is the surround?
That's right, it's like a key ring around it to help protect it, where you keep your horses and soldiers and so on. It's a fairly temporary type of thing until the Norman lords feel a bit more secure. And then when they feel more secure, they want to build a stone castle. That's what happens. So there's a possibility there's more than one castle on the site. A timber one and a stone one. And we're all chasing the stone one over there and tending to forget that there might be a temporary castle here in the first place, just while the lords and the barons get themselves established and control this crossing.
Back at the mound, the good news is that Phil's worries about the roots are clearly unfounded. Our first trench is already huge. And it's produced what look like 2 small ditches, although they are in fact both sides of a much larger one. But the bad news from our point of view is that the few bits of pottery they've found are all Roman, so it may not be part of the castle.
I'll let you go first.
The walls in Bridget Lovett's garden look a better bet.
They're great big stones like that. They must be medieval work. It's nicely tooled diagonally. Oh, there's lots here. And here again, big chunks with this sort of rough diagonal tooling.
Oh,
and
yes,
the
actually.
little levelling courses. It's very typical medieval work.
So you'd be confident this is medieval?
I am,
what
yes.
sort of medieval date?
It could be any date, fairly late on. There's a funny bit in the corner where it's cut away. I'm not sure it is cut away. I think this is a little shallow buttress.
Would that help you date it at all?
Well, it certainly would, because these shallow buttresses tend to be early.
What sort of date would that be then?
Well, that would be the latter part of the 12th century, and on just into the 13th.
Bingo, our castle walls. Behind them, back on the site, our first trench is still looking Roman, so Phil wants to put in another, just where he first suggested this morning. He's got geophysics on his side too. Their results suggest there's a wall there. So Mick's having a wander around, but because of his injury, he's doing it in comfort, while Nick and a camcorder do the legwork. They're looking at Trench 1.
OK, go round the other way, Nick, right round to your left, and then bring us across to this other earthwork. This is more or less running along the line of that breaker slope anyway, and then it turns.
Right.
Ah, there's the corner.
And there's the corner, which is just down here, and we're then looking back along this earthwork here. Right there, Nick, that's great.
For ease of slope, for ease of access, that a trench through there is just going to be so much easier.
But the problem, Phil, is that I'm not sure this is the same earthwork as this one round the front.
It sure as hell looked like it to me.
Well,
I've been and seen it, Mick. I walked up and down it.
I've driven around it in my Jeep, right? And I wonder whether this isn't a garden earthwork.
Yeah.
Like a terrace that's going
Well, it
back.
looks that way to me.
Yeah.
It looks like a terrace actually
Yeah,
coming round.
and it turns a right angle at the end.
So are you saying that one there is originally a defensive bank which has been incorporated into the gardens?
I think that's more likely.
Well, that's fair enough.
Whereas this one here
It's
I
purely
suspect
for
is pure
gardens.
Right,
And
so
therefore, if we dig a trench across this,
Yeah.
we're not going to get the story, are we? Of the,
No, that's true. It could be the wrong place if you're
Yeah.
right. But it might also be the same feature that actually runs round both sides.
Yeah.
With the might of English heritage on his side, Phil's view prevailed.
We want to come up there.
They're going to extend Trench 1 further up into the mound and put in the new trench. Still desperately seeking medieval.
Come this way then, if you wouldn't mind.
But the new trench is only a few yards away from Trench 1, which appears to be Roman. And everyone now agrees the mound is probably a much later garden feature. It all sounds like a long shot to me, but then what do I know?
Looks like medieval to me, Mick, doesn't it, do you?
Yeah, it's nice bit of medieval. But is it in specified or is it in the fill on the top?
Oh, it's just in the top. But I mean, when I compare with what we got over here to what we had in that other trench, that was all Roman.
Yeah,
I mean, there wasn't a sniff of this stuff at all.
yeah.
So we're getting finds, and from the right period. That'll please everyone, not least the local council. Jill, why are you so interested in what's under the ground here?
Basically what we're trying to do is create a community park, drawing on the archaeology of the area, drawing of the history of what is underneath Malton, Norton and Old Malton.
Hang on, where are we now?
We're stood in Orchard Field now, Tony, which is just here. It's
Yeah.
the site of the Roman fort.
Oh, so that's the fort just over there?
That's right, this is the old Roman fort.
And where's our dig?
The dig's taking part in these grounds which are at the back of the lodge, which is just straight in front of us down there.
Yeah. And this community park?
It's a series of walkways which is going to link the three communities together. Cycleways, scented nature trails, that sort of thing.
And have you got the money for this yet?
Oh, not yet. This is why you're here. The idea is to try and get as much public support as we can. We've got it because community groups are already backing us, but it's the time to get their hands into their pockets and come up with the cash.
So if we uncover something interesting, it's really going to help?
That's right. You're going to give us the idea for the whole overall theme, and also you're going to provide us with finds which we can put on display in Malton Museum.
By the end of the day, most of the nettles are down and both trenches are well established, though with mixed fortunes. Trench 1, resolutely Roman. Trench 2, reassuringly medieval.
Well, Beric and I got really excited about this.
This is great. This is a piece of 13th century pottery that's from what's called an aquamanile, which is a water pot. There's the seating of the lid and the knob, but up against the knob from each side was an animal made up of pottery like this, and it's a sort of hideous frog-like thing. And you had put it in pride of place in the middle of your table and poured your water from it.
And it's the sort of thing you'd have had in a high-status building like a big castle, even though it's just been found in the rubble.
It's a great thing to lead us on now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, end of day one, we've got Roman, we've got medieval, we've got our mystery ditch, and we're still waiting on more geophys results.
Yeah.
So hopefully tomorrow there'll be more finds. I think we're all pretty certain of that, aren't we?
You bet.
And hopefully we'll find the Jacobian house.
We hope so.
See you after the break.
History Hit is an award-winning streaming platform built by history fans for history fans. Enjoy our rich library of documentaries covering key events and locations of the medieval period. History Hit's medieval offering features leading historians such as Dan Jones, Eleanor Janega and Kat Jarman. Not only that, but we've a rich library of audio documentaries covering every period of history through our network of podcasts. Sign up now for a free trial, and Chronicle fans get 50% off their first 3 months. Just be sure to use the code Chronicle at checkout.
Stuart's on the scent of the Jacobian mansion, and he's off to survey the area where he thinks it's likely to be.
It's still quite handsome, even despite the amount of erosion it's got, but it must have been wonderful at one time.
And this is one of the clues to its location, a 17th century lodge that was probably the original gatehouse to the mansion. The extension would have been added in Victorian times. These days, it's owned by local businessman Norris Binner, who wants to turn it into a hotel. He's collared Berwick to tell him where he thinks we should be looking.
Yeah, well, you dig it over there, Berwick. My own gut feeling is that the house is down in this part. What's your opinion?
Well, I think you're probably going to turn out to be right. It's likely to be like most Jacobean houses, symmetrical with its facade. And I've managed to find another one that's exactly the same. And as you can see, it's got 9 squares. Those around the outside are gardens, but if you come in through that lodge house, there's a big courtyard in that square, and behind it is the house straight ahead of you. And that, I guess, on a smaller scale than this one, is the sort of thing you got here.
If Berwick and Norris are right, then the mansion should be in this area here, about 60 feet below the lodge, directly symmetrical with it. Which was exactly Stuart's thinking, and he's already plotted out the possible size and shape of the building. While Geophiz are still hunting the castle in the most recently denettled area just beyond. And Carenza and I take to the air to try and put the castle into the context of medieval Malton.
Yes, if we could just head down straight ahead a little bit off.
We're looking for the medieval borough boundary and the old marketplace. But because it's market day, the first thing we see is the modern one.
That's the present marketplace with the church in it. And in fact, the medieval borough boundary curved round the back of that. So where you can see all those cars parked and the houses with the white facades, the curving line comes right round. You can see that. That street curves right round, crosses the main road, goes round the back there, forms this lovely curving sort of enclosure around the medieval town.
We could also see that for the castle to overlook both the River Derwent and the town, it must have been in our half of the site. Good news. The old market was harder to spot from up here, but down below, Mick's discovered it on foot, so to speak.
This is the old marketplace.
Yeah,
the original one.
I mean, the whole of this big square was originally the market, wasn't it?
Yeah, I've seen that on the maps.
Yeah, around here you can see the filled-in arches, look.
Yes, when it was originally open underneath for the traders.
And then we've had the market in wet weather under there.
Yeah.
But you can see the full width here. Look, there's the other side. We've been at the one end, and the whole thing's going off down there. Give it some honour. That's it.
It's okay for you, mate.
Peaceful now with the market on Saturday, as we turn into Finkel Street.
Totally different from what it must have been in the Middle Ages, mind you.
Yeah, I bet.
You know, the more documents I look at, the more you realise what a hell of a life they led.
Yeah.
I mean, hardly any of the Veskies who built the castle managed to die in their beds.
Oh, right.
You know, crossbow bolts and javelins through the head.
Oh, good Lord.
You know, meeting a sorry sticky end at Bannockburn.
Yeah.
You've also got the double destruction of the castle that took place first at the hands of David of Scotland in 1138. Then you've got the much better documented one by King John in about 1214, where we've actually got the cost of slighting the castle, when they spent £11 2 shillings and 8pence in employing 9 men to tear down the castle. Yeah. But they apparently used local fishermen.
Well, what were these chaps doing? Undermining the walls or something?
Presumably. Yeah. And also setting fires in order to destroy the timber structure of the castle as well. Yeah. Violent times indeed.
Well, that's right, yes. It's difficult to imagine now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Phil's gone to see an instrument of that violence actually in production.
This is what we're trying to make then, a sort of early medieval sword, is it?
Very, very late Norman to early medieval.
And it's just simple blade with a cross guard and a round pommel.
That's right, yeah.
A vicious weapon.
Absolutely. You pump the bellows slowly and evenly. It's got a counterweight in the bottom. You give it time to sink down, that pumps the air through evenly.
Oh, I see.
That should be ready to go now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And I can grab hold of this end without
Absolutely.
It's
yeah.
not hot?
It's warm.
Good Lord. So then. So what do I do then?
Just hold it flat against the anvil.
Yeah.
And hit with the hammer. Try and keep the blow straight.
And gradually we just work our way up the blade, do we?
Very slow, very steady.
Wouldn't have believed that I could have had this much power over a piece of metal.
The situation we're at the moment, Norris, is that from the work we've done on the gardens and the buildings, we've identified really that the big Jacobian residence should have been somewhere in this area here. One of the big problems we've got, if I can just draw it out for you, it'll be easier. We've got the lodge, which is the gatehouse there, the road's out the front. Down the back here we've got a whole series of garden terraces. And the archaeology and the architecture suggests to myself and Berwick that we have a house sitting there, which is in this area here.
Right.
But the problem is it might be square with a courtyard in the middle, or it might be with a frontage there and two wings, in which case it might be open courtyard at the back. And where we put a trench in here is going to be very difficult, so we might put a trench in and hit the courtyard and not hit the building. So at the moment, I've got no geophysics here at the moment, and it's a right sort of mess in there with nettles. I'd feel happier if we could get rid of some of these nettles and get some geophysics in before I stick my neck out and put a trench in. How do you feel about me asking that?
Couldn't we sort of take a chance now with the measurements we've got and dig the channel out now?
I think taking a chance is the wrong approach for the sake of half an hour clearing the nettles off and another hour or two getting geophysics results.
Yeah, I think we must go with the geophysics first, definitely, and then actually pinpoint the trench, because in fact we haven't got many trenches left, and we've got to make every trench count here.
That's right.
Yep.
Shall we get the lads in and
let's get that done.
Stripping?
Yep.
No wonder Norris looks worried. This is his garden we're uprooting.
Are you sure about them taking those roses out down there? You're not bothered about it?
No, they're all. Let's get it cleared out and let's get on with the job and find it out.
Well, at least you get your garden done for note, don't you?
Well, we do, yeah.
True Yorkshire, really.
Back at the arms factory, Barry's taken over from Phil and is progressing fast. Well, at least he's got it square now. Phil's gone back to have a look at the trenches. The second trench, which yesterday gave us the aquaman eel, the jug with frogs on it, continues to produce fascinating objects. Anne,
Hi.
got some finds?
We've got finds.
What you got?
Well, I've got some window glass.
Look at that.
Oh, pretty.
Isn't that delicate?
Very delicate.
It is, isn't it?
And to go with it, a piece of
The lead.
Ah,
See the grooves where the glass fits in?
yes, I do, yes, yeah. Now, could these be either from our Jacobian mansion or from the medieval castle, do you think?
I don't think they're from the medieval castle. All the finds that we're getting out of here are pretty consistently 16th century, so I mean they're good 1500s dates. I mean it's a nice assemblage, beautiful.
So we are getting somewhere.
Brilliant,
Oh, yeah,
not a problem.
No problem.
Anything else?
Oh, what? As we speak.
Brilliant timing. What's that?
It's lead, fishing weight by the looks of things.
Yeah,
Oh, and these are
little grooves
Little
in
grooves.
them.
Is it?
Outside.
And I dare
lovely.
say you
Some on
probably
the other
find
side
there's a
as
little
well.
hole in the top there, is it?
and this would be 15th, 16th century.
Yeah.
Gotta be, yeah.
I like that. But nice as finds like this are, I'm a bit worried. Yesterday, this trench was producing medieval pottery. Now it's all later stuff, which doesn't bode well for finding the castle. 2:45 day 2, and Mick and Carenza are comparing notes from their expeditions this morning, with the aid of Sue and her computer graphics.
That's it through there. Across.
Can the layout of Malton give any clues?
And the other one comes straight down.
That's it through
the
there.
middle,
Across.
straight down, straight through and across the river. And you can see then the castle's on the hill, dominating the town, the road crossing, and the river crossing over there.
That's going off to Scarborough. That's going to York. And this is the earliest centre. That's that square block.
There's that market area possible in there.
Yeah. And there, of course, that's the present market. You can see all the little white roofs of the awnings of the stores.
You can see me, look there in my wheelchair.
Oh, is that where you were?
Yeah, looking up at you enviously.
As a result of that conflab, Mick and Carenza decide to get the digger into action again and put in another trench. The third of our 5. The aim is to find the castle wall overlooking the old town. With the wall Berwick and Carenza found on day 1, they would then have 2 sides of the perimeter and a good idea of what the castle might have looked like. But once again, there are a few trees to negotiate. Meanwhile, Phil's turned his attentions to Trench 1, the one with the Roman ditch. Yesterday's decision to extend it out of the trees into the mound seems to have paid off. Mick the Dig has found a wall.
You've got this nice rubble coming off and it's coming onto a nice clean surface there.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
It's got to be the castle, isn't it?
I don't know.
Come on, come on, mate. Look, I mean, you've got all this muck on the top of it. This has got to be a substantial building if it's got mortar floors. I reckon it's got to be a stout contender.
All right, then I'll go with that. I'll go with that.
But you ain't got any fines?
No fines, that's my problem. If I had some fines, I'd be with you there.
I don't care. I reckon this is good.
Okay.
Clearly Berwick, our buildings expert, will need to adjudicate on this.
Stuart to John Gator. Go ahead, Stuart. John, they've cleared all that stuff out in the orchard now, so it's ready to geophys if you are. Okay, Stuart, we'll head over and start pegging out.
So we think we know where the Jacobian mansion was?
It's wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah, here. Well, under here somewhere, anyway.
Yeah.
Then at the end of the house there would have been this courtyard, which Berwick says would have been quite demure, not full of little squalid houses, and beyond it a coach house, and that's the remnants of the coach house.
Right.
What sort of family lived in it?
And built it, of course. A family called Eure, E-U-R-E. They were very wealthy and powerful in the northeast of England, and in fact they'd owned a third of Malton Manor from several centuries. There was one snag. They were a bit out of step with their own times. They were what we call recusants.
What's that mean?
Well, after the Reformation, if you carried on being a Roman Catholic, you really represented something of a threat to the new Church of England and indeed to the state.
So did that mean that they were all incredibly persecuted, or is that just a myth?
Well, most of them were just fined. Some of them, if they were as wealthy as the Ures, pretty heavily. But subsequently, in the 1620s and 30s, they did represent a threat to the establishment, and the sheriff was ordered to seize the house and make sure that all the armour and armaments in it were taken.
So it was actually attacked?
There's a lovely document where Lord Eure tells them to go and stuff themselves, basically. He has told the sheriff he will hold possession until Christmas Day, do what they can if 1,000 men were there, and that if the sheriff shoot down any part of the house, he will set fire to the rest to his own damage and danger of his neighbours. Well, the sheriff's not going to take that lying down. And finally, the sheriff brings up 50 men and a great piece of ordnance, a huge gun, and batters the place into submission. Comes in at night and takes possession.
It's amazing. So it was a private house.
That's right.
And and the cops come with big guns and bash it
poor
down.
old Lady Eure, you know, with cannonballs whistling through the windows, saying, "Crumbs, what have we done to deserve this sort of treatment?"
Bizarre. Robin and I think we know where the mansion is. So do Norris and Berwick. And now Geophys have got their results, so do they. And we all want a trench. But someone's got to decide exactly where to put it.
Now, are you sure you want the trench over in that location there, rather than actually further back here?
It's almost 6 2/3, I feel, at this point in time. If we go this way, we might also lose the house and get too close to the terrace. If we go too far that way, we might also miss. If it's a very small house, I mean, there's a horrible thought goes through my head that it's in between and the trench won't hit it. But we've just got to find out what's there, really.
So we've agreed on the location at that end there, and you're going to go with that, are you?
I'll go with that.
Okay then. Yeah. Well, I
Very
hope
much
you're
on
right
the
there,
site at all.
because your career's on this one.
No,
It's make or break time. With the castle by no means tied down and only one more trench allowed after this, Trench 4 just has to hit the mansion.
but that's a definite change in soil there. That line is actually standing on the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
And anything that's on that alignment, that's what we're looking for.
But time's marching on, and with that little hint that the trench might be in the right place, they call it a day. The true test will come tomorrow.
If I get this wrong, it's not.
Well, you better not. I've been relying on you.
It's just about there now. You want to go for it?
Go for it. You're
All right.
ready when you are.
Here we go.
I better get out your way, I reckon. Oh, God, that's impressive. That is amazing. Oh, wow. And what do you call that? Quenching?
That's the quench. That makes or breaks a blade. That's the most vital part in making a sword.
So, well, what do we do now?
Now we grind the blade and polish it.
Right.
And once that's done, we fit a handguard across here.
Right.
We fit a handle there, and we fit a pommel on the back to make the whole thing balance out.
Is there any chance we can do some grinding?
Yeah, by all means. On we go.
But it wasn't long before they too succumbed to the lure of a drink and headed back to the lodge.
Don't run,
Here is a man.
Here's the man.
Who's been fast asleep for 2 hours resting his leg.
Jolly good too.
What's been happening, Stuart? What's been going on in your trench?
Well, we put a trench in to see if we could find the Jacobian mansion. We opened it not too long ago, and it's looking quite promising at the moment.
Carenza?
Well, after a certain amount of humming and hawing, we did eventually manage to get the digger through the trees to the bank. And it looks as if the bank that's there is turning up a rubble wall, which may be the remains of the Norman wall underneath it, but we need to do it.
So that's over by...
Yeah, that's over on the west side that we're talking about, so that's looking really good.
What about you, Barrick?
Well, I've been looking in the old Trench 1, which we've extended, which we've continued to work in this direction, and that's brought up a medieval building, a freestanding medieval building within the area of the castle.
Fantastic, that's great. That's great. It obviously all happens when I'm not here. We'll stay away more often, doesn't it?
End of day 2. Looks like we've definitely got our Jacobean mansion. We've certainly got something medieval, but what did they both look like? Let's hope we can find out tomorrow. Cheers.
Cheers.
9 a.m. on the final day, and geophysics are castle hunting in a new area.
The trouble is, it's really close to where the fort entrance is.
Yeah, but this is what you thought was the...
I think that's the ditches.
The ditch of the fort, yeah? What haven't we got in this? It's certainly...
We need Stuart to...
Yeah, but the thing is, this is really different, isn't it? We haven't got anything like that elsewhere.
Okay. That's a gamble, isn't it? It's either a medieval castle or a Roman building.
Stuart has other things on his mind, in particular the Jacobean mansion. He's got no finds yet, and although he thinks the pale area is a flaw, there's no guarantee it's part of the house. Meanwhile, Mick's on the prowl again, over at Trench 3, where Carenza thinks she's found some of the castle.
You can see at this end of the trench we've got this light bank there. It's a bit difficult to see here. You feel fairly detached from it when you're in
well,
here.
Well, you are detached from it, but I can't get out there.
Yeah. Well, there's this light spread here. This is a whole load of building stone with an awful lot of mortar in it.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a collapsed wall.
Yeah.
We haven't actually found any of the front or back face of the wall, but it's just the collapsed material from it. If Nick could go down a bit further,
go down the trench a bit, Nick, if you would. Just talk to me here.
There's no foundations to that.
Right. Okay, good.
That's it, right. Now if you can just sort of pan up the trench as well.
So look up the trench.
So what's obviously happened, they've built the wall, they've scraped down onto a fairly solid surface, which is this orangey stuff, and then built the wall up from that with really no foundations. But it's very similar to what we've got in the other trench
but the
one
wall's
over
all
there.
robbed out, is it?
It is, yeah, and there's just this rubble and mortar left. It's
what sort of dated
undesirable
stuff have we got from this?
We've had medieval stuff. We had a bit of medieval floor tile.
Right.
Some iron nails come out of that little bit of glass.
So we're
a few
looking
bits
at
of
something
pottery.
medieval rather than earlier, or
yes,
later.
I think 12th, 13th century.
Right. Can we go to the wall and look over? Because I can't get there. I'd like to see whether we've got any sort of view over the town at all. That's great. It is, as I suspected, really quite a drop when you're looking right
out over to the
which
town.
is what we were saying yesterday with the plan and everything, wasn't it?
So we've got the perimeter of the castle, as you say, overlooking the town on the high ground.
And we can see that it is high ground because we're at roof level, looking over the wall.
John and Chris eventually dragged Stuart away from the mansion to look at their mysterious new printout.
Yeah. This is a Roman fort here. That's your section of ditch coming through there, isn't it?
This is the avenue of trees. Yeah. And that's the high resistance response we're getting from the bank.
Yeah.
But this clear building, it's just inside the fort ditches.
One of the thoughts I've had since we started is that the early medieval castle builders may have chopped off one corner like that, so you can use the existing defences and then put a castle or a castle mound inside there. And that could be the first castle on the site, so getting something there could well fit in with that theory.
The area they're talking about is right on the edge of where we're allowed to dig, immediately below the Jacobian house in what would have been its garden. The blue car there is the Team 4-wheel drive, and it's just brought Mick to the scene of what Stuart and Geophysics hope will be Trench 5.
Right, Nick. There's the results. We've now extended the survey.
John Etty's come along to keep an eye on things.
Yeah. We're convinced that must be some sort of building. The problem is we just don't know the date.
I'm not convinced, though, that this is likely to be the location for the castle wall, to be honest. Not on the evidence that we've got so far.
Why is that?
I think it's just as likely to be Roman. We don't know how far the castle went this way. And but
you look a bit worried about whether or not we should be digging this trench. I thought we'd got 5 that we could do.
Well, that's true, but it really depends on the results that come up each time. 5 was the maximum.
Yeah.
The thing is, all the presumptions are in favour of the physical preservation of ancient monuments, not the preservation by record. That's considered second best, really, because techniques do advance through time. The geophysics people have actually shown that. Really, some years ago, we didn't have all that new technology at hand. And as a result, if we dig too much now, there'll be less for the future and for future generations. I understand what you're saying, but that's why we need to proceed with caution on these nationally important sites.
Proceeding with caution is John Etty's job. But I think deep down he wanted a trench as much as we did. So what precisely are you proposing that we do?
Well, I would propose that we did put a small area in over that to test it. I mean, we could work out the sort of area we've got left in relation to the time, but I don't know, a 5x2 or something like that.
As small as that, you think?
Well, if we want to know what the character of that geophysics is.
Sounds to me as though John's prepared to give us a bit more than that, Mick.
Perhaps I've said too much. I think the main thing is...
Perhaps I was being more cautious than he is in the end.
No.
You're such a radical in every other area, and yet
really?
as soon as it comes to scheduling, it seems to me that you're really sort of doffing a cap all the time.
What concerns me more about this is the time to do the work and the recording in the time left. It's not leaving a mess behind us that concerns me.
Right, gentlemen, it is 11:15. Day 3.
Coffee time, in fact.
No way is it coffee time. this argument, which I must admit I've been instrumental in extending, has meant that we really don't have very much time.
We've got to get on.
If we're going to do this trench properly.
You've got to push on.
Yeah. So we've got a shot at finding Stuart's castle, but only on condition John Etty can stop the trench whenever he wants to. He's been very supportive so far, letting us dig fairly deep, but it's been worth it. Trench 1, if you remember, was where Phil and Mick the Dig found a wall yesterday. Berwick has since confirmed it's part of a building inside the castle. Trench 2 has been taken deeper and revealed this, which Berwick is very excited about.
I know you've got that, Jeff. We've gone through all the 16th century dump layers and the demolition. We went into what it must be medieval, and we seem to have quite a big wide wall through here.
Yeah.
And I would guess that it's going to run off down here and turn to meet the equally large wall that robbed out in the first trench. So we have got a big medieval building standing here.
Both trenches have produced a vast array of finds, from Roman through medieval to Jacobian, and they all need to be cleaned up.
We've had a couple of other ones of these. What are they? Are they cups or something? Vases maybe?
I think it's part of a vase. We have had some other pieces very similar. They've got a nice pattern on, haven't they?
Back in the incident room, Sue and Berwick have started to reconstruct the medieval aquamanile found on the first day.
And look, its front leg sits on the top of the lid.
Oh, yes, it does.
And the back legs dangle down. We've got one on the other side. And so its feet would rest on the shoulder of the jug.
Oh, I think that's rather
Right?
cute.
Oh, well, maybe. I think it's all a bit tasteless. But there we are.
It would have been about 6 or 8 inches high, and tasteless or not, would have adorned only the very smartest of medieval dining tables. Perhaps Richard the Lionheart or King John, both of whom visited Malton Castle, drank from it.
OK, Stuart, what have you got?
Well, I think you'll like what we've got, in fact. I'll show the finds first. What we've got from here at the moment is a piece of window lead, some window glass.
Fantastic.
We've got ceramic tile and roof tile.
Yep.
And we've got this little beauty, which looks like a stone mullion. Exactly the style and period you'd expect from a Jacobean house.
That is fantastic. So that, with the window lead and the glass, that's destruction, isn't it?
Absolutely. Do you know what a mullion is,
I'm
incidentally?
clear what a stone mullion
It's
is.
it's a stone window frame.
Right.
And it's typical of the period of a Jacobean house that we'd be looking for. And to add to that, Mick's just been showing me, they're looking to get the plaster floor from the range of the building below that destruction layer. So, I mean, to me, it looks pretty conclusive that we've got a range of the Jacobean mansion here.
Oh, that's wonderful. And it's all in your garden, Norris.
It's all come together.
It's all come together as well.
And we're probably standing
Right
in
in
the
the middle of it.
courtyard. Yeah,
Right in
we're
the
in
middle.
the courtyard here.
Yeah.
It's absolutely super. I'm thrilled about this.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Steve has now got enough information to reconstruct the mansion. The lodge was the original gatehouse, through which you'd pass to be confronted by a magnificent 2-storey mansion built in 1604. The house and its magnificent gardens would have dominated the area. But the splendour was short-lived. The mansion met its end just 70 years after it had first been built.
Lord Ewer dies, and the place is inherited by 2 sisters, cousins, and they can't agree. In 1675, they cannot agree as to how to split this house up. And the litigation has gone on for some 20 years, and eventually the High Sheriff steps in. He says, obviously, enough is enough, and he orders the whole place to be demolished, and effectively gives 1 stone to one sister, the next stone to the second sister.
Good heavens.
2 piles of rubble are divided between them.
Sounds like a divorce almost, doesn't
Well,
it?
it is. It's kind of judgment of Solomon.
Yeah, yeah.
Only in this case, the baby was very definitely split through the middle.
So while Mrs. Binner struggles to keep at least one part of her garden intact, the archaeology is falling nicely into place. We've got the mansion sorted out, the shape of the medieval castle is becoming clearer, and Trench 5 is well underway.
It's one of these, if it's going to go down, and who knows where it's going to go down.
Yeah. I can take it back.
Can you move on back then, Ken?
I mean, beautiful just to simply verify the edge that we've got.
Yeah.
Just to see if that's real.
Just to prove whether we're right.
Well, that's it.
Mick, like the rest of us, waits on tenterhooks to discover whether it's Roman or medieval.
Right, this is just a very rough...
And Berwick's hard at work with Steve.
That's the wall that we saw in people's gardens by coming in from the road with Carenza the other day, and that's a narrow buttress and a little hole in the wall which are there, and so I've used that to project and devise a building.
The castle we found was probably the second one on the site, rebuilt in the mid-12th century after the previous one was destroyed in Stephen's reign. Steve and Berwick have had to make a number of guesses, but Carenza's wall in Trench 3, together with the walls she and Berwick found on day 1, give the perimeter. The buttress in those walls suggests a building here, and the walls in Trenches 1 and 2 suggest another large building here. The castle was built in stone, with a commanding view over Malton town and the River Derwent. All we need now is the first castle from Trench 5. John?
Tony, hello.
I've just heard we can't dig this trench anymore.
That's right.
What's the problem?
Well, I think so far, actually, we've already answered some of the questions about the geophysics. It looks to me as if just about everything here's later. We're talking garden archaeology here. And in fact, if you look down here, you've got...
Can I come on here?
Yeah. You've got a good example of that. We've got a piece of a pot from a garden plant.
It's a flower pot.
That's right.
We found a flower pot. How old is our flower pot?
Well, I think the flower pot could be quite a few hundred years old. You see, it's very roughly made. And it's the sort of thing you'd find in these sorts of gardens here.
But it's not very interesting, is it? I mean, why don't we just take this layer off and get down to the archaeology?
Well, in fact, it is. I mean, really, what we've actually got here is part of the formal gardens of the Jacobian mansion.
Well, everywhere's a garden, John. Every built-up site, there's going to be a garden there.
But this was associated with that very important site, and it's actually worth protecting in its own right. I can't see any evidence for the castle being in this location. It's just, it might be here, but I don't think we're going to find out on this exercise.
So we're stuck, that's it?
I'm afraid so.
That's the 5 trenches. How frustrating. Stuart's castle has slipped through our fingers because of a garden. But I suppose I shouldn't complain. We've found what we came for, and the gardens are really a bonus.
And one of the ideas for this site that we've got here, because you've discovered that it used to be a formal garden, what we'd love to do now is to actually recreate that formal garden here, where it was, using the same sort of flowers, hedges, everything that there was there.
That would be wonderful.
It would, it'd be great.
John was saying that there is a formal garden like this in Chipping Camden, I think, that was actually laid out in the shape of a Union Jack.
Mm.
You don't reckon that?
No, I don't think so. I don't think the people around here would appreciate a Union Jack, perhaps a Yorkshire Rose or something like that.
Well, only if there was one in the original one.
Absolutely,
stick it in.
Oh, Barry, how you doing?
Hello, Phil.
Wow! Good Lord, is that the same?
That's the same one.
Good God.
The grinding's finished, the polishing's done, that's now a finished sword blade.
How long have you been doing this?
Oh, all morning, about 4 or 5 hours.
What a beautiful thing. Feel proud of it?
I will when we get it fully assembled.
Of course, yeah. We've got to finish it off.
We've got to finish it off.
Is that it?
That's a finished sword grip.
John, this is incredibly heavy. Can you get my helmet on?
Sure, no problems.
How did people fight with that weight on them?
Practice. From the age of 10 years old, they'd have been trained to wear this kind of equipment, and despite the fact this weighs sort of 60 to 80 pounds, or sort of 4 or 5 stone, once it's actually on you, the weight's evenly distributed, it's actually very mobile.
And is this authentic?
Absolutely correct to the period. You've got the mittens, the long sleeves, the very long mail underneath your surcoat here. But yeah, once you're actually used to wearing it, you can run around, jump, ride a horse, use a sword, and you've got a shield and a lance, which you should be carrying as well, so you'd have even more weight on you than you have now. You are the equivalent of a medieval tank.
Well, it certainly works up an appetite. The weight on your neck is enormous, isn't it? Do you fancy a bit of pig roast?
Yep, definitely. Come on.
Come on. Come in, lads. Pig roast time. As a reward for our hard work and their hospitality, we invited the residents of Malton to join us in a feast. And there was good reason to celebrate. By this time tomorrow, all the archaeology is going to be covered up again, and it certainly won't be seen in our lifetime, but we've had a chance to have a glimpse at a Jacobian mansion, and at a Roman fort, and a medieval castle. Not bad for a weekend.